Hi, welcome to the show. This is a podcast that is going to focus on this idea or this label called twice exceptional or twice exceptionality or 2E. And in this podcast, we are going to delve deep into what it is and resources that parents can access to to learn more and to try to connect the dots between their child and the services and supports out there to help their child navigate this complex condition and to find their tribe, to find their strengths, to see a future that's bigger than the challenges that they face in the weeds in school systems or at home. And this is an awesome opportunity. And we have a really special person joining us. Her name is Courtney Edman, and Courtney is she's a mom first, but she's also a passionate professional that has redefined herself after working with her own child with the similar challenges. So she's super energetic and she's extremely competent in what she now knows about this condition, and she is passionate to help anybody out there in the world that needs help because she's gone through the weeds, she's gone through the muck and the storms, and would love to be able to turn back around and help families and children avoid the pitfalls and get the service and supports for their children. So I'd like to welcome Courtney to the show. And first and foremost, Courtney is a mom of a 20-year-old daughter, a 17-year-old son, and a 15-year-old daughter. She also has an incredible supportive husband of almost 23 years and a wonderful terrier rescue who is her faithful walking companion. When she is not spending time with her family, traveling or watching her daughters play volleyball, she enjoys playing tennis competitively as well as getting outdoors to the beach. Professionally, Courtney is a licensed physical therapist. Since July 2016, she has been the executive director of the Chest Physical Therapy Service, which is a private physical therapy practice whose sole function is to provide chest physical therapy in the homes to patients who have a chronic, life-shortening pulmonary disease such as cystic fibrosis. Together with a clinical director, she supervises a team of over 80 subcontract physical therapists who provide chest PT for about 160 patients across the country. In addition to supervising the therapist, she advocates for insurance coverage, oversees daily operations of the business, including patient intake, physician communication, training new subcontractors, as well as providing ongoing training opportunities for her team. Prior to this role, she worked for 15 years in early intervention programs as a physical therapist and certified IE specialist, supporting families with children between the ages of birth to 3 who had been identified as having developmental delays and diagnosis that was known to affect development, or who were at risk of developing a delay. Most recently, she has become involved with the Chris Walsh Center for Families and Educators at Framingham State University as a parent support group facilitator, as well as in the Massachusetts Association for the Gifted Education Advocacy Group, with a particular interest in twice exceptional students. In her professional time, she has found herself in the privileged position of witnessing the everyday and ongoing journey of many patients and their families, their challenges, triumphs, frustrations, and uncertainties and resiliency. She has been grateful to have had the opportunity, with the scope of her practice, to walk alongside these patients, problem solving, researching, advocating, empowering, cheering, and reassuring, and helping them persist through the various medical and physical challenges that each of them have faced. As you will see, in addition to her inherent strengths, aptitude, and experiences as a person, her professional experiences have informed and helped her as she has navigated challenges in her own life as a mother. While she has sought support for her son through her life, she did not connect with us until last November. Even though it has been just a few months, she has become incredibly grateful for the newly discovered connection and services, and for the opportunity to share her story. All right, welcome, Courtney. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here. Excited.
Yeah, this is a new frontier for both of us. I think me doing these video podcasts, and for you, this is kind of following your heart in a way, to start to move in a direction that matches your kind of personal background over the last, what would you say, 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes a little bit further than that, given my age, which I don't need to disclose today, but it's been a culmination of my entire life experience, my education, my professional life, and then my life as a parent. And everything's kind of merging together into this moment in time where, like, wow, this is sort of what I must have been born to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Has hit me over the head within the past couple of months.
Well, that's so affirming, and I think I would love to transition to give you a chance to tell us a little bit of how you got to where you are right now. I've introduced you to the audience, but I haven't really kind of given a chance. So I was going to leave it up to you to delve into where you came from and how this all came about. This passion for the twice exceptional child and this direction to start expanding and connecting and moving into a professional realm where you can start leveraging this expertise of yours in a more hands-on support with families and children out there in the world. So if you mind, tell us how you got to here.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to skip over my education and professional background because I think you sort of alluded to that in my bio, if I understand correctly.
Absolutely.
So as you mentioned, the journey kind of has been about 20 years, but that's really in isolation to my parenting journey. So I have a 20-year-old daughter, I have a almost 18-year-old son, and I have a 15-year-old daughter. That may have been mentioned in the bio too. But I've been on this journey with my son for about 17 or 18 years. And I've always known that he's been different. He's different than my 20-year-old daughter, different than my 15-year-old daughter, different than his peers in elementary school years, middle school years, and now high school years, and different than most of my friends' kids of similar ages. And when he approached his middle school years, like late elementary, middle school years, he started to have an awareness also that he was different. But none of his teachers, guidance counselors, special educators, camp counselors, and my parents, my husband's parents, sports coaches, different services that we got him into, the professionals in those roles, nor even his pediatrician, psychologists that I spoke with, psychiatrists. None of us could pinpoint or articulate that difference. We definitely had clues along the way. And when he was around 10, he was diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety. And with those diagnoses, I was so excited because I thought, finally, we have an explanation and we get on the path to helping him and to kind of solve the riddle of what that difference was. But even after he started to take medication, he still had challenges, and I couldn't figure out what supports he needed or I needed to access on behalf of him to kind of figure out that missing piece of information.
Yeah. So at which point and I think anybody listening will kind of start to connect some dots here. Be like, oh yeah, that's definitely my child, Courtney. Now, at which point did you start to put the finger on this twice exceptional label? And how old was he, and how hard was the journey to get to some kind of understanding of this kind of quirky child I have, but with some amazing gifts that no one's really recognizing?
Well, it didn't happen really until last spring in his junior year. So, with the diagnosis of ADHD and anxiety that happened around 5th grade, we started to have the full team evaluations at school, then again in 5th grade, then again in 8th grade, and then in anticipation of him going to college. We had a neuropsychological evaluation. And I had thought that it would have been good to have a private neuropsych evaluation previously, but one of the social workers, psychologist, I guess he was, who actually was a pivotal person in my journey with William and validating me as a parent, being his best asset and instead of kind of his worst nightmare and the problem. Because I had a psychiatrist tell me that I needed parenting skills and parenting classes to help my son, but I didn't think that was true. So I was told not to get a neuropsych eval for my son in his middle school years, and that the one at the school would be sufficient. If I had it to do over, I would have gotten the neuropsych eval at that point in time. But my journey and his journey consisted of getting the neuropsych last spring, because we knew we would have to have documentation for him to receive services through the disability services centers at a college if he were to go that route. The last spring, I took him to a neuropsych psychologist, and in her report was the word twice exceptional.
Wow.
And I had never, he was in a gifted program in elementary school. We had worked with a social worker, a psychologist, guidance counselors, his pediatrician. He went to a camp last summer for boys with ADHD to work on social skills. In none of my 17-year journey with him and 13 years of searching for information with him did anybody use that word twice exceptional for me. And even, in fact, the neuropsychologist who used that word in her report didn't share with me resources to help me dive into the community of the twice exceptional resource. And so in my own reflection on where William was, kind of where he needed to be if he was going to enter into college, but more importantly, just to try to help him be successful with the gifts that he did have and to reach his potential and his own goals.
Right.
I knew there was still something that needed to happen in addition to executive function coaching, in addition to medication. And it was kind of that twice exceptionality that said he needs to have all of that plus therapy, but with somebody who actually understands his disability as well.
Yeah. Now, Courtney, press pause for a second, and I'm going to shift from the mom hat to the, to the now, 2E expert hat. Just for the clueless people out there, myself included, really, how are people defining twice exceptional now?
So one of the resources as I dove into this community of twice exceptionality that I landed on is a website, www.bridges.edu. It's a place that's out in California that specializes in twice exceptional students. And according to them, and I'm just going to read it because it's a quote from them, twice exceptional, or 2E, the lowercase e, is often used to describe students with high ability and potential who simultaneously experience learning, executive functioning, production, and/or social challenges. They are challenged in most schools by a misalignment between their learner profile and the school's curriculum and instructional approach. So in my words, that means that a twice exceptional or a 2E child is someone who has tremendous potential to learn, intellectual abilities, but they have a disability or disabilities. And that the important piece to keep in mind is not all twice exceptional kids are the same, because their learning strengths and their learning disabilities are different. And so the approach still needs to be individualized, and there needs to be an understanding of what the child's strengths are in addition to what their challenges are. And both need to be addressed in ways that most of the time are different from a typical school system. And the other piece about the twice exceptional students, and part of the explanation of my journey of not finding how to help my kid, particularly in the school systems, is that twice exceptional kids are most of the time doubly underserved, because they don't receive the services from their gifted side. So a lot of times the twice exceptionality is labeled as a gifted student with their learning abilities from a strength perspective. So they're gifted, but they also have a disability. And so they're not receiving an approach to learning that meets their giftedness, but they're also not being identified as having a disability sometimes because their giftedness masks their disability. And so these kids who need gifted support and disability support sometimes get nothing because getting by because they can, even though they could be doing so much more. Sorry.
Yeah. So obviously you're a parent that made some, didn't know what you don't know, didn't know what you needed to know early on, right? So you and your son fumbled your way through it together, and yet he's had a, obviously you're extremely conscientious and extremely bright. So to be able to get to where you are now probably took a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of sleepless nights. So when we think back to the beginning and you think about lessons learned and you think about if I were to help parents avoid certain pitfalls or give them the top 3 most important recommendations if they're at this crossroad of trying to identify or help their child identify with with who they really are, where that they're not necessarily accurately labeled on their IEP, right? And there's something more to them that the school does not recognize, and the chaos and the struggles are so much that they're starting to identify with the pains and these disabilities as opposed to identifying with the strengths, right? They're true innate abilities that are going to present themselves to the world as their greatest asset, right? And the schools don't recognize that. So parents are forced to either take their kids out of school and homeschool them as a last or sometimes the last resort, move them maybe into charter schools that have maybe smaller class sizes, maybe more nurturing environment, or other kinds of decisions. But if you were to think back with these parents and really position some lessons learned and some kind of core suggestions and recommendations, what would you have the parents start doing?
Well, first and foremost, I think the thing that got my son and me through this and my family is I always said to my son, I'm your biggest cheerleader. And just trying to get him to not give up on me and the challenges that I was having as a parent, balancing setting limits that were necessary as a part of life, but also validating his experience. And so without that relationship between your child and you, being trusting and validating the experience of the child of situation, without that relationship being relatively solid, I think nothing's going to help. So first and foremost, I think finding help to get the relationship to be one of trust. And for me, I had mentioned before that there was a psychologist that was pretty pivotal in our journey, and he was the one who really helped me adjust a little bit of my parenting skills and such. But more importantly, he helped my son see that I wasn't the enemy. And we started there. That's where our first point of healing happened. So if you already have that, fabulous. Keep it going. Whatever you're doing is working. If you don't, I suggest starting there. If you do already have that baseline relationship that's healthy and trusting and validating, the next step that I think is the most pivotal is to learn what your child's strengths and challenges are from a neuropsychological perspective. And if I could do it over again, I would have gotten that neuropsych when he was in elementary school, probably around the time of, I don't think I would have done it that much earlier than 4th grade, but certainly no later than 5th grade, because that's when the academic challenges and the social challenges really started to become more real. And I don't know enough about neuropsychology nor the testing that they do, but my my instincts say that that's when they will start to see a cognitive profile academically that shows a little bit more of that giftedness.
Right.
And it might show a little bit more of the disabilities as the expectations for academic work become that much higher.
Yeah.
That's, I think, where I would start.
Yeah, those are great recommendations. And I think, as you and I have talked about your son, he was able to find a tribe early on, or at least athletically, right? And I think that's I think a lot of our parents and really find this the hardest part of this can be when their child is not really is really struggling to connect with a tribe. And I was wondering if you have any suggestions, recommendations for those parents that are seeing their child suffer and struggle with that, with trying to find that peer identity.
Yeah, so it's funny because I am an athlete and my tribe has always been on sports teams, as has my daughters have found their tribe there too. And so naturally, I tried to help my son find his tribe in sports for a variety of reasons.
Right.
He was a willing participant and he did find, I wouldn't call it his tribe necessarily, but he was able to find teams that accepted his differences and accepted what he could do within the context of sports. But it never was really his thing. He has found a tribe in high school on the volleyball team. And I think that is in large part due to the coach and his ability to meet kids where they are and raise them up as leaders with their skills. And he's a unique and fabulous coach. So my son's tribe in high school has been the volleyball team. So that's probably what you're referring to most recently. But his tribe early on came, well, not early on, but in middle school, came thanks to a teacher who was a gamer. And I don't mean video gamer. He was a board gamer. And he introduced through an after school activity that was offered, the board gaming. And so then William found his tribe, I think of about 7 or 8 boys. And then I recognized this and said, this is fabulous for him. And so I started and coordinated an every Friday night board game night with his 7 or 8 friends that could come over. And we just had pizza and board games all night and on Friday nights after school. And it was so meaningful for each of the boys and their mothers because I mean, I tear up almost thinking about it because for each of us as moms, our boys finally found their tribe, their true, and they were connecting off of screens in real relationship ways, in person. And, you know, their energy was complete chaos, but it was such a beautiful thing. And it was so meaningful for them. And it was beautiful. And they were at a charter school, a regional charter school. And so upon graduation, they've all kind of scattered, but I know my son recently talked because they have stayed connected through the internet and gaming online. And they were talking about having a reunion this spring. And so now they're just going to have a reunion online instead of in person until they do otherwise. But that got them through middle school. It gave them a sense of confidence. It gave them a sense of, I have value, because they found their tribe at that stage of life, which is so critical developmentally to have. And it bolstered them each year and then when they entered high school, they had that level of self-confidence that I matter, which, you know, is priceless.
Yeah, it is priceless. It's priceless.
And he also in his high school years has found Dungeons and Dragons. And so that has become his high school tribe. It's a whole different set of kids who he has met and, you know, and now he's a dungeon master hosting Dungeons and Dragons in our basement with 8 17-year-olds every Monday. And so it's a new level of chaos, but it's, again, that's such a beautiful thing because he's happy. He's, you know, he's stopping to get the soda, the water, the 17-year-old boys, they're ordering pizza if it's on a Monday day. And now he's working to try to create that same community and connection online. So he's using his programming skills, which is what his shop is at the regional high school, um, and connecting with someone in Poland who's his mentor to guide on how to bring, make an online Dungeons and Dragons community happen for his peers. And so there's success, and these are all the strengths that these kids who are gifted, who hear the message when they're growing up, when they don't have the information about who they are, and are told, you're a failure, you're lazy, you're just like every other teenager, just do what you're told. And those messages can be so damaging to these kids because they have so much potential. And so that relationship, that cheerleader, and then the right tools and supports and approach is so important. And as a parent, plugging into the community where you don't feel like you're being told you're the problem and you're doing it wrong when you know your kid is just wired differently, and responds differently to boundaries and limits and behavioral charts and all those things that don't work with these kinds of kids all the time. Finding that community to plug into is so important also.
So Courtney, that is a, that's a really nice transition to what you're trying to do as you try to redefine your tribe, right? And this is a step in that direction. I think anybody listening to this is going to be inspired by your personal journey. And as they delve deeper into the blog that they're going to have access to, they're going to understand the wealth of resources that you've been able to research and dig up as part of your own personal story, but also because you've found a calling to move in this direction, to become an expert partner with parents and children out there that are looking for answers to these kinds of questions. So what I'd like to be able to do is just provide a contact information, and I'll put it into this video so that parents, if they have questions, can reach out to you. Would that be all right?
I would love that. I really feel like this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I know how hard the journey can be. I know that I'm a pretty smart, capable, resourceful, resilient person. And if I haven't been able to find answers in the over 17 years that I've been looking, and 13 really intentionally looking, imagine how hard it would be for someone who doesn't have those same type of time or knowledge, resources, or persistence, or drive to just figure it out. So I am so hopeful that I can help whomever I can help.
Well, that's great. So we'll end on that note, and we'll connect this information out there to at least the greater South Shore, greater Boston community, and worldwide, and start to watch the impact you have on this the parents out there. I'm really excited for you, Courtney. This is exciting.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for listening, and I hope to hear from many of you soon.